Welcome back to Sketch Today. I'm Spencer, and today we're going to take a look at another material. We're going to look at leather and how I'd go about rendering that with some marker, some pencil on my marker paper. And next time we'll take a look at how we can apply this material to an actual product. So let's get into it. So the first thing you'll notice is I have a few markers here with me. I've got some Prismacolor markers, some blacks, I've got some browns. And so what I'm actually going to do is use these browns to build up and create my texture. If you take a moment and just watch my video about how to sketch wood, understanding how a material works helps us understand an approach or rendering or representation of that material in a very natural and well-reasoned way. So that being said, as we always do, we'll start with our lightest lights against our darkest darks. On my page here I have a cube and I have a cylinder, and I'll show you how I'd go about rendering these as if they were made of that specific material. Okay. Now leather is a natural material that's derived from the skin of an animal, and if that's disturbing, totally understand. You can not watch the rest of the video, but if you were sketching a product that had leather, it's important to understand where that comes from. Okay. So as I'm shading with my marker, my Prismacolor marker here, and if you use Copic markers, that's totally fine, or Shinhan, there's a lot of different marker brands. In fact, I'm working on a video upcoming that'll just talk about different markers, pluses, minuses, the different brands, and kind of what's available to you so that you'll be better informed about your marker decisions. Okay, now with our cubes, as always, we have three faces that are presented in the sketch. Okay, this is a simple object, so we can take a look at this. Now on the perimeter of this cube, because it's made of leather, I'm going to actually intentionally not draw my lines perfectly straight. Okay, so I don't know where you'd actually find a leather cube, but we'll just assume the sides here are made of leather. Now lightest lights to darkest darks, I'm going to start by just shading in on my marker paper with my Prismacolor marker. Now you'll notice that as I'm shading this in, I'm still trying to create a gradient from one side of the top of my cube to the next, but in terms of the actual marker stroke, I am using kind of a random pattern to my stroke to create an overall noise or texture to the top of that cube. Now that I'm zoomed in, you can see a little bit better. And now that marker is dried on the paper, reapplying, or rather applying some extra pigment to that area will help me create my gradient on the top. So there's my lightest light. So now I can do my second face here. You could also do this technique, which is shade in the face to create some base color. And then, because I'm using the same marker, over those strokes that I applied initially, come in and do that random technique. Okay. On the far side here, I'm going to switch markers to one that's just a little darker. So this is a light tan Prismacolor. Here I've got a sienna brown Prismacolor, and since this face of my cube is facing away from the light, it's going to be darker than the other faces. So let's get some of this stuff out of the way here. As I rotate my page, I can shade in just like I did that other face, like so, and do my random shade technique here, which will give, as you can see, a different value to that face of my cube. Now if I want this second value face to read a little darker, I can come in a little bit with this other tone here, darken up that face, and now I've got 1, 2, 3 values. Once this is dry, we'll hit it again, but we're going to use another little trick to help push the value in just a sec here. So that would be the 3 values of my cube as I'd apply them. Now you can see there's a general feel, general texture to the whole cube, and that's kind of what we're after, this natural texture recreated by using our markers in a creative way. So now that we have that base texture down, I'm going to save some of the pencil and line work for the end, because here I just wanted to capture the three values. If we had a cylinder, if you recall in my video how to properly shade and light a cylinder, there's a shadow core, okay, and creating a blend to a highlight area as I go, in this case, from left to right, skipping a line there, maybe hit that, and then just kind of work the blend from left to right to get that highlight in. Now you might wonder, where would you ever see a leather cylinder? Well, you can kind of think, you know, if this were a bag of some sort, for example, you know, there's a loop on the top here that maybe, you know, there could be a zipper around this and so forth. But anyhow, base tone down rather. Now I can start to apply that random texture technique. And the important thing with the cylinder is to create this feeling of a wrap gradient by pushing our shadow core right in the middle here. Okay, and blending that from left to right and so forth. So I can come in on this side. Adding things like stippling also helps reinforce the feeling that this is a natural texture as well. Okay, just a couple random stipples, and I just wish I had a marker just a little bit darker. This gradient would be a little bit easier. But if you're shading the cylinder and you're not really sure, you can always squint your eyes, take a look at it. So as I get to my area of what would be a highlight, trying to be careful and leave that not entirely shaded in, but rather have that texture of the marker come through, as well as that feeling of a gradient from left to right. Okay, and now that we're in the spot and we've got the marker down, we can start to add value and some detail. So for example, let's consider the edges of this leather, right? Now if this were a leather cube, I probably would have distinct pieces of leather sewn together. So right here on my edges, I'm going to try and show that this cube is made up of and stitched together using different panels, okay? So if I just introduce a little line on these edges, kind of a double line, then I'm able to show that there is a separation between these pieces, okay? On this far side, I could even come in right where that double line is, and it's really subtle. Just adding a little bit of dark marker on that double line will help reinforce the separation of the material on these two faces. On the bottom, because it is the bottom of my leather cube here, make those lines just a little darker. As I move to the top, make those lines lighter, but as well trying to capture the double line, right? And on these edges, for example, just a little bit of darkening and then fade away from the edges. Okay, so light in the back, and as I move to the front, increase the pencil pressure so that there's a darkening of these lines. So all these little things come together and help add to the dynamic of our sketch here. There's another double line there. All right, great. So we've done a few things to convey leather. We have a texture, we have the separation on the edges. Well, leather is typically stitched together, stitched into something. I have with me here, surprise, this is set of colored pencils that my wife used almost 20 years ago. And I love finding old art supplies. They're fun. Never, just throw away your art stuff, because you can always find something useful and bring it back to life with a little bit of care. So these were well used, well loved back in the day. And I'm just going to pick a couple of brown pencils out of this set, as well as let's see, this is a French gray, 10%, so not quite white, but we'll use it for some highlights on our edges. So now that I have a brown pencil, I can do some cool things, like from this corner or this edge, start to push the contrast on that edge, okay? And the reason for that is when you have, in three-dimensional situations, look in the room around you, for example, where the walls change direction in the room, there is perhaps a change in contrast on those surfaces. So by pushing the contrast at this corner, and for example on the back corner here, on the top, okay, and on this corner right here, so a little extra pressure on the pencil, by pushing the contrast, I'm able to convey a greater sense of three-dimensionality in this piece of leather. The other cool thing about pencil is pencil tends to pick up the texture of the paper that you're drawing on. And I happen to be sketching with some Fang 360 marker paper, and it has a good tooth to it, meaning it has a good texture. And so I'm able to really give a sense of natural feel to my leather. Just on these edges, I'm going to add a little bit of this French gray pencil. Okay, and that's going to also show a little bit of a light catching edge, okay, where this changes direction to further give a three-dimensional feel. Well, like I said before, leather is typically stitched, so I'm just going to come in here and add a few stitch marks, and these are just a dotted line all the way around the perimeter, as you can see. And now I'm starting to communicate, oh, this is something that is stitched, and the stitch lines are following the perimeter of the shape. And now on the opposite side toward the light, I can add a little bit of my French gray to these stitches, which will help them read as round. Hopefully you guys can pick up on why that is. If you watch my videos about how to light a cylinder, because these are kind of like mini cylinders in terms of how you treat them as you draw, you'd have a dark side and a light side to them. So our eyes at scale, so if I zoom out at scale, you'll kind of see that there's a general effect to this, okay? Just a little bit of value through the middle here to perhaps show some of that wrinkling that's happening. Okay, just a few little things like that. You can see now we're starting to show the surface quality in this particular piece of leather. So on the back side, I'm going to hint at the stitches but not totally render them out, and that's because this face is in shadow, okay? So it's not going to get... Things that tend to be in shadow don't have as much detail as things that are in the light. On the top, we'll do the same thing really quickly. Like so. And a little bit of that white pencil as well. In a few areas to communicate that three-dimensionality. White pencil is super handy if you're trying to just get some tone or form out of your sketches. So if you have some dark spots and you want to lighten them up, having that white pencil is super duper helpful. Okay, let's darken up the bottom just a little bit more. Okay, I have this rule with my students, which is the 80% 20% rule or recommendation. A lot of times when you're drawing, you get 80% of the way there and you think, yes, I'm done. But it's those 20% differences that can make your drawing really sing. So on this leather, I'm going to sketch in and very subtly, I'm going to zoom in here so you can see some very subtle wrinkles, okay? And these wrinkles, much like the wrinkles we have in our skin, is something that the leather might have, okay? Just a couple little wrinkles here. And I'm showing that by applying a white line right next to a dark line, okay? So on the top, maybe I have a couple of these as well. Get some white in there. Okay, and up close, you might not see it, but again, boom. As soon as I zoom out here, you can see that the general effect is achieved. But what about the cylinder? Well, we won't go through and render the whole thing, but you can imagine, again, having a little of a natural feel to the pencil on the outside here. Okay, and that double line for the top as well. But what about the shadow core? Well, like I mentioned before, because I have this brown pencil, I can come in and add tone right where I need it. And I'm not just adding, black pencil to this, so it's not going to look super weird, but rather a color rather in the family of the color of my marker. And if you use Prismacolor, they make pencils as well, so it's really easy to find a marker that blends with your pencil in terms of color and feeling like it fits in as a part of your drawing. Okay, so pretty simple, right? So a lot of material rendering is about just figuring out creative ways to use your tools to mimic those natural effects. In this case, we applied a random stroke to the marker, layered that on with some pencil. In terms of the construction of the material, also conveys in the message as to what the material is based on how we're drawing it. So in other words, having the double line edge on our cube is communicating that, hey, this is a stitched together material like leather. Okay, and ultimately, of course, if we wanted to, we could label our material leather. And of course, labeling your sketch is the ultimate in identifying what is happening in your sketch. Well, hopefully you guys had fun, and if you did, feel free to share the video or subscribe to my YouTube channel, where you'll be the first to know when I post a new video. If it's at midnight, you'll be the first to know, or if it's in the morning. It's the best way to keep up to date on our daily sketch series here at Sketchaday. Thanks for your time. You can find me on Instagram at sketchaday.com or on facebook.com/sketchaday. Next time we'll be taking these techniques and applying them to a real product and seeing how applying this material can really bring things to life. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time on Sketchaday.